YouTube, it's Rain again. I'm going to be doing a little bit of a different format for the rest of these colors. I realized I was saying what all the cards do and that was taking a lot of time. The reason I was doing it, I'm a very auditory learner, so when I say what a card does, I typically learn more than just reading a card. But I realize a lot of people are in fact just visual learners, and even if you're not, you can read the cards yourself, so I'm going to be going through them a lot faster, just saying how good the card will be, upsides, downsides, that sort of thing. So I should be able to cover two colors in a video. This one will be black and red, and we'll start it off with the sweet one. It's Bellowing Saddlebrute. 4 or 5 bodies are good. The raid means that basically you have to attack to play this guy, but at 4 mana for this body, it's just ridiculous. So if you can profitably attack with the guy, this becomes a very, very strong card. Bitter Revelation. In a slow format, this isn't so bad, even at sorcery speed. It gets you a little bit of selection in your scrying, and it gets you a little bit of delve enabling as well. It should be an okay card. It's a little slow to note, but it should be fine. Bloodsoaked Champion. I think it's actually going to be very bad in Limited, simply because not being able to block is a real thing to consider. It just hurts the card a lot, and you won't be able to get in late, or even pretty early on, he'll stop being able to get in. So you may get 2 damage off on him, and you may be able to just bring him back, but he can't block, so that's less of a consideration. So I don't like it. Dead Drop. So at 10 mana, sacrificing 2 creatures, sorcery speed, and delve. How much am I willing to pay for this card in a deck? I'd be willing to pay 6 mana for this. It's a solid 2 for 1. It's bad against certain decks like warrior decks that have a bunch of tokens, but most of the time it's just going to be very good. So exiling 4 cards though, 4 or 5 cards to make this good is a heavy commitment. Really heavy. Like more than most of these delve cards, so it's actually not going to end up making most of my decks simply because this 10 converted mana cost. If it was down to like 8, that would be much better. But at 10, I just can't see it being consistently great. Debilitating Injury. It's removal. It's not great removal, but it's removal for the early drops, slow down the game. It's at common again, so just a thing to note. You're going to play it. Next up, Despise. I don't like this card in Limited. It's very strong in the first like 3 or 4 turns of the game, but after that it just goes down in value by a lot. Even in a slow format, this sort of effect the fact that it can do nothing if you draw it super late into the game just makes it not very good. So, not a fan. Disowned Ancestor. This is a pretty good card. In the Outlast decks that really want to stall into the super late points of the game, you can Outlast him on turn 2 if you don't have any other plays, like setting up a morph creature on your turn 3, so it's pretty easily able to get a counter, and then you can start doing some things with him. He won't have a lot of power, but he's going to clog up the ground early, get you to the later portions of the game where Outlast will just be probably the best mechanic that you can have. So solid in the Outlast decks. In non-Outlast decks, he gums up the ground and has a little bit of an upside, but that prevents him from blocking, so you have to consider that when playing this card. I would mostly just play him in an Outlast deck. Next is Dutiful Return. It's a 4-mana sorcery. Um, in a slow format like this card can be good. I wish it was instant speed because then I can hold it up for later, but it should get you decent value. Don't want your deck to be too slow, so keep that in mind with this sort of card. Empty the Pits is awful. I've done some calculations. Even if you do a very, very, very heavy commitment into this card, the 4 black symbols in a set that you're going to be playing 3 or 4 colors is already hard to cast, even more so than the cards that cost 3 different colors. And the amount you get for it and the fact that the zombies come into play tapped just makes this card awful. Grim Haruspex. The 3/2 body, which I talk about being actually bad in the format, is offset by a powerful ability of just being able to draw like 2 to 4 cards with this is insane, so it should be able to get you value. It's not great though. Grimang Swiftwing. So I was talking about a few of the white cards being very black-white because of the clans they're good in. This is another one of them. Flying for strike haste on a 1/2 flyer for 2 mana. This is going to enable raid. It's also going to scale incredibly well with counters, the +1/+1 counters. So these are things to keep in mind. It should be at its best in the Abzan decks because these 2 abilities, Flying and First Strike, are just amazing once you get this up to a 3/4 or even a 2/3. So consider that. Karu Bloodsucker, 3 mana for a 2/2, so he is kind of bad when you have a lot of guys that you want to be morphing on turn 3. His abilities, a lot of creatures will have toughness 4 or greater, so that drain ability is kind of nice to have, and being able to get some value off of your creatures that are dying. It's a pretty heavy mana cost, but it's just another way to use your mana and to not end up getting to a board where you just can't do anything in the super late game. So it's just a little bit of an upside there. So you should be fine. Karu Dreadmaw. I don't like 4/4 defenders. They're going to be trading most of the time, and the sacrifice another creature ability gives you some value in some of your other early drops, but it's just not a great ability, so I'm going to pass. This card's just probably unplayable. Krumar Bondkin, 3/2 black. He flips up for 5, so it's the same as his cost, but you can put him down earlier, and supposedly it's easier to splash, but I don't see why I'm splashing a card like this anyway. I'm not a fan of this card, so yeah, we'll move on from there. Mardu Skullhunter, another card I'm not a fan of. It comes onto the battlefield tapped, so you can't even block with him the turn you play him. They can choose what they discard, so discarding effects with that sort of thing in mind aren't strong, so this guy's just not good. Mur-Ek Nightblade, a 4 mana 2/3, so when it comes down it's much below average. However, it has a cheap outlast cost and it makes all your guys with the counter have death touch. Typically your outlast creatures, you're going to be having them be really big, and you're going to want abilities like the white one that gives first strike and flying, so giving death touch to all your guys that are getting bigger isn't necessarily the best, but it will allow you to just hold up a few blockers and hold up less blockers, enable you to outlast more of your guys because the few guys you have untapped have death touch, so they just can't attack you. So this guy should be really good in outlast decks. Molding Snakeskin. As with most auras, you're gonna lose value really quickly. There's so much removal in this set, and it's all so good. So even though this has regenerate, the amount of like exile removal and the amount of tapping removal just makes this unplayable, even in an aggressive deck. Murderous Cut, an amazing card in a slow format like this. An instant speed, destroy target creature. I'm already happy paying 5 for that. And the fact that it has Delve so you can get extra value just makes this card fantastic. And first pickable in draft, certainly. Necropolis Fiend, a very relevant body at all points in the game. A very good blocker. Upside of removal. It has some counter synergy with its Delve and its ability. However, when you're choosing how cheaply you want to play your bomb versus how much you want to use your bomb for removal, these are the sorts of decisions where you're just like, well, I'm in a very, very good spot if those are the decisions I'm making. So a solid bomb, it'll get you value throughout the game and be relevant at every point in the game. Raider Spoils, wholly unplayable enchantment. The warrior tribal thing, I kind of see what they're going for. However, it's just not going to be all that great. So unless you're really stuck in your pool of playing like a warrior tribal deck, this card's not what you need. Rakshasa's Secret. It's a mind rot that allows you to enable Delve. Mind rot is typically not good. You can side it in if your opponent has a lot of bombs, so you can play it around like turn 5 to 7 because they'll be holding their bombs and suddenly you can make them discard. However, a lot of bombs also have morph, so this is a sideboard option, and you need to consider whether it's a good one or not based on what they have. Retribution of the Ancients. This is way too slow and takes away a lot of value from your creatures in order to remove guys. However, it costs you a card to have this effect, and it's not a very great effect, so no, I'm not playing it. Rise of the Serpent. 6 mana removal at sorcery speed, acceptable in a slow format, especially since it doesn't have a clause other than just destroy target creature. It gets some upside against Abzan and a few other cards that just have +1/+1 counters, and it helps enable raid somewhat, so those are some other things to consider with the extra part of text past destroy target creature. Rotting Mastodon. This card is a blocker, and it's actually one of the few things that can block Zergo Helmsmaster and not die when it comes down. So maybe sideboard there. You might want to play it in the main. No, I just can't see it. It's way too slow. And it's not going to start winning you the game. So no. Ruthless Ripper, my favorite in this cycle. It comes down early against rush decks and trades. It is an amazing card. They can't play around this card so it just makes attacking into a black deck with a morph creature a headache if they do want to try to play around this card, and if they don't, you're just gonna block their bomb, say haha, we're gonna trade 1 for 1, and you're gonna lose 2 life, which isn't a big upside, but it's an okay upside. So just the surprise 1/1 death touch is incredibly powerful, and it's not even just that. So awesome card, first pickable in draft very easily. Shambling Attendants. This card, people have been talking about whether this is the sort of card you want to play as like your 1 or 2 of Delve, which I think is going to be a thing in this format. You're going to typically have to exile 3 cards for this card to be good, but the 3/5 body with Death Touch interacts very profitably with a lot of creatures in the format, especially with the amount of 4/4s. So I could see it, potentially. I'm not very inclined to, though. CDC's Pet, another slow down the game card. The 1/4 body is really, really bad. There aren't too many 3 power guys that aren't just flying or unblockable on their own. So most of the guys in the mid or later portions of the game will be 4/4s, and this guy just turns into utter crap. However, if you could drop him on turn 4 against an aggressive deck, that's where this card's at its best. So even more cards that just say aggro is not going to work, buddy. So keep that in mind. Sultai Scavenger, 6 mana, 3/3 flying. How many cards do you have to exile to make this an on-curve flyer? 1. So solid. Very solid common. Swarm of Bloodflies. First time I've seen this, let me read it real quick. So this is the sort of card that you're paying 2 extra mana over your typical 2/2 flyer, and what you're going to be using are the fact that it comes into battlefield with +1/+1 counters, so it has some synergy with some Abzan cards, and after 2 or 3 creatures die, this just gets out of hand and becomes something they have to deal with. So I would say you typically play this in an Abzan deck, and it should be okay, if not a little slow. Throttle, it's a reprint of Lash of the Whip, and it looks like the whip this time is the Snake's Tail. Lash of the Whip was slow removal and not tremendous, but it's removal, so you're going to play it. And 4/4s being the body makes this better. Unyielding Kumar, 3 and a black for a hill giant, so it's a 3/3, and it can get first strike. Not a fan. It's good for blocking early, but in the later points of the game, this body will become much less relevant. Moving on to red, we have Active Treason. It's threatened, so you gain control of creature and swing with it. This is a sort of play that makes you want to be an aggressive deck, as you're going to lose a card if you're not doing a big attack. I'm not a fan of Active Treason in this set. I think with the boards being wider and wider, Active Treason gets worse and worse because the upside of taking away a blocker becomes much less relevant. So I suppose it's a card you'll play if you're trying to play an aggro deck, but I just don't like aggro decks given just how many ways there are to stop them in this format. Anok Tracker, a 3/3 first strike, for 6 is unplayable, for 5 is still bad, so no, pass. Arc Lightning, this is fantastic removal. You can kill a Morph guy and a 2/1, you can kill a 1/1, which there aren't too many playable 1/1s, but there are a couple. It can do 3 damage to a creature, so this is just a versatile card, and it's a very good card, so good removal. Aerostorm, 5 mana for a sorcery, which is more relevant than 3 mana for a sorcery in the later points of the game. It should be solid though, because 4 damage or 5, that isn't tremendously hard to get for 5 mana is good. It can even have the upside of being used as a finisher, which I like, so good card. Don't want to overload on too many of these though. Ash Cloud Phoenix is a bomb. It's a very hard to deal with bomb. If you have a cheap flyer, you can start flipping this face down, but how are you going to remove it without losing card advantage. Suspension Field doesn't hit this. It's just really, really hard to deal with this card, especially once you start getting up to 6 mana, so you can start flipping it back up and quickening the pace of the game with your 4 power evasion creature. So great, great, great card. Barrage of Boulders. So it does 1 damage to each creature you don't control, which isn't good. But if you have Ferocious, creatures can't block this turn. So this is when we get into the synergy between Ferocious and Prowess. So you play this card, Prowess will trigger, then this card resolves. And if one of your Prowess guys had 3 power, then suddenly you have a Ferocious trigger. And this is a very, very Jeskai sort of card. I suppose it's also some of the other clans, but you're basically playing this to prevent their creatures from blocking and to force through damage. And if that's good for your deck, that's good for you. I would say it's at its best in the Jeskai aggressive decks, though. Bloodfire Expert. This card isn't great. It doesn't survive trades unless you have specific cards, and it doesn't force through a lot of damage because they're just going to block you. So, not a fan. Bloodfire Mentor. I am a fan. 0-5 going to slow down the game a lot, which most of the decks I'll be playing are going to be slower decks. And the fact that even if you're playing a slower, more controlling game, you can just start instant speed looting for not a lot of mana. It is a bit of mana, but it's not unreasonable. In addition, he blocks 4/4s, and if they want to use a combat trick to kill this guy, good for them. I'm not too unhappy with that. Bring Low, more good removal. Gets especially better against Abzan, but it's still just good removal. 4 damage, deal 3 to a creature instant speed. I'll take it. Burn Away is very good removal. 6 damage for 5 mana. Instant speed is very, very good. It also has the upside of shutting down Delve more, so keep that in mind. Should be very solid removal. Canyon Lurkers. This sort of flavor of card is meant so that if they don't block your Morph guy, you can surprise them by dealing them 5 damage instead of 2. I don't think that's very good. He has 2 toughness, and they're gonna block your guy. So it makes some calculations a little harder just because it's there, but I don't think it's a very good card. Just incentivizes me to block Morph creatures more, and they're not tremendously hard to block anyway. Sometimes they are because you have to consider what it could be, but this makes it more incentivized to block Morph creatures. Crater's Claw. Blaze has always been good. It's removal, it's a finisher. You have to know when to use it as removal or a finisher, which is better. The upside of getting in extra damage if you have a ferocious guy is nice. This card is incredibly, incredibly splashable. People have been splashing this effect for ages, and they will continue to do so. Dragon Grip. So you can flash it in if you have a creature with power 4 or greater, and it gives your creature 2/0 in first strike. This one is tempting to play, however it's still an aura and they can still just cast removal on your creature in response or after it resolves, and you will just end up losing a card. So given just how much removal there is, this isn't good. It's almost good, but it just isn't. Dragon Style Twins, a very hard to deal with card. It's very hard to block a 3/3 double strike and prowess. They play a single combat trick, and suddenly your 4/4 just gets eaten, or your double block just gets blown out completely and you can't even kill him. You can't even not block him either, because if they have a trick, you're just taking a massive amount of damage. So you need removal for this guy. This is a very answer or die sort of card. Goblin Slide. The value of a 1/1 with haste is just virtually non-existent, and so you're just spending a card for this effect, and it's not good. So pass. Horde Ambusher. If you're trying to play an aggressive deck, this guy should be fine. Prevents blockers early and is a bear by himself, so decent. It's what you're going to want to play in an aggressive deck, and if you're not playing an aggressive deck, this guy's going to be bad because of his downside of if he blocks, he hurts you. Hordeling Outburst. This is like the sorcery speed version of the white instant that costs 5. However, those are warriors and these are goblins, so I like that one even more than this one, and this one isn't great. They're going to be able to block your guys. Even if you spread them out super wide, if they're 1/1s, they'll just get eaten. You'll get through like 3 or 4 damage, and then you'll get through 2 damage, and then you'll get through no damage. So, Howl of the Horde. This card is unplayable in limited and unplayable in constructed, but I know there are going to be Johnnies who are like, I can get a 2-for-1 with this. It's just way too hard and way too inconsistent. But you can try it. If you're a Johnny and you just like playing Magic that way, go for it. I'm just warning you now. Jeering Instigator. It's the reason I thought they wouldn't reprint Active Treason in the set, but he is a pseudo bear, so a 2-mana 2/1, and if you flip him up, you can Active Treason something, so you can gain control of a creature and swing with it. As with Active Treason, I think boards are going to be wider, so the value of taking out a blocker is going to be less, so not a fan. The body is not going to be good, and it's just not a great rare at all. It's just not a good card. Leaping Master. Now this is actually a 2-mana 2/1 that I can get behind or get under. He gets flying, so he can actually be relevant. He can trigger Raid without dying himself, even though it's a pretty heavy mana commitment to get in that triggering Raid so you can play your creatures on main phase 2. All I'm going to say is he's an early drop that isn't irrelevant later on because he can gain flying. So that's why I like him. Mardu Blazebringer. If you have some sort of sacrifice combination where you can sacrifice him to something else before he gets sacrificed at the end of combat to get a bit of value, that's nice. He's also he's consistently going to get you a 1-for-1, not necessarily on the things you want to remove, but on something that you will decide is good enough for this guy. He's pretty good. He's not great though. If you have sacrifice synergy, then he can be much better. Mardu Heartpiercer, a morph killer if I've ever seen one. The raid that you get off of this is solidly powerful in a format with morph. So he's very good. I also like 2/3s. They block morph creatures for days, and they block with 2/2s to take down 4/4s. So yeah, big fan of this card. Mardu Warshrieker. He's going to help you splash white or black if you need to do so. He's going to block early on and double block later on, so know when to play this card. He'll be very good when you need to splash these colors, so he'll just have added upside. But know when not to play this card, which is if you're just playing him as a 4-mana 3/3. Monastery Swiftspear. I'll go back to Mardu Warshrieker real quick. You can still play him as a 4-mana 3/3, he's just a lot worse. Okay, Monetary Swift Spear, a 1/2 with haste and prowess. Getting there for 1 on turn 1, but that's totally irrelevant. They'll be able to block this card, and you'll have to have something. 1 power is... I'm torn because I actually kind of like the fact where its power and toughness is aligned. I just wish it was a 2 mana 2/3 with haste and prowess instead of a 1 mana 1/2, because it's going to be a lot harder to make this work and a lot harder to get value out of it. If it was a 2 mana 2/3, I'd be a lot happier with this. Though I suppose you're probably going to play it in your prowess deck if you have the synergy for it. Sarkhan the Dragon Speaker might just be the best bomb in this format. He's 1 color. He becomes a ridiculously hard to kill creature. He kills creatures himself, and he has an irrelevant -6. But let's be honest, this is the least important part of pretty much every single Planeswalker since the dawn of time. So these 2 abilities are incredibly powerful and limited and inconstructed, so he's going to be a fantastic card. Just take over the game. Shatter, sideboard card. Don't play it in the main deck. Summit Prowler. He's going to trade. I'm actually a fan of 4/3 bodies. They're really good against the 2 power bodies, and they're really good against the 4/4s. So he should be filler, but he should be decent enough filler to play. There are a good amount of 4/5s too, so maybe side him out if you need to, or side him in if you feel like he's got there. So he's on the borderline. Swift Kick. Nice. Okay, so this is Red's Hunt the Weak. Makes your guy slightly better and then just says, let's go at it. If you have a lot of big creatures, this sort of card gets better. It's an instant as well, so you can do it in response to combat tricks or in response to removal. You can get some extra value out of the creature that's about to die. So this should be solid. Tormenting Voice. I think this will be good. It's cost 1 less, but you have to discard a card to get your 2 cards. So it's more like a card selection card. However, that's never been bad. And a 2 mana card selection for 2 cards should be worth playing. Trumpet Blast. Just more lining into the fact that Jeskai decks are aggressive. I'm not sure if this will be good, but giving all your Jeskai prowess creatures +3/+1 at instant speed for 3 seems very, very good. And so in the right deck, this card can be good. Valley Dasher. A bear with haste, which is awesome, but he has to attack each turn if he's able to. So not so awesome. He's going to end up dying a lot for nothing, so no. I'll pass on him most of the time. Some of the time, if I'm playing like a prowess deck and I have ways to keep him alive even if they block, maybe I could see it, but not most of the time. And lastly, Warnamed Aspirant, a 2 mana 2/1 raid to make it a 3/2, and it can't be blocked by creatures power 1 or less. If you're playing an aggressive deck, there are a lot of 0/3s, 0/6s, 1/5s, so this is actually a relevant upside. But if they're playing those sorts of creatures, then sure, this can get through, but what else is going to get through? Pretty much nothing. So not the biggest fan. Later on, 3/2s, as I said, are bad for blocking bears, dealing with 4/4s. But if you're playing an aggressive deck, I can't see just not sticking this in. I just don't think aggressive decks are good. But if you're playing red, you can make an aggressive deck. especially if you combine it with a lot of the blue tempo cards. So I like red and blue if you want to be aggressive. Well, that's it. Thank you very much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know how I did, and you all have a great day.